Some wars are fought for land, some for money, and others for power. But every now and then, a war is fought for God, and throughout history, these religious wars have killed millions. So were they fighting for God? Or were they just fighting for power and gold? Welcome to my channel, and today, let's find out. The Crusades, perhaps the most infamous religious war in history, was a series of holy wars sanctioned by the Latin Church in the medieval period. The goal, to reclaim the Holy Land, which had been in Muslim hands for over 100 years. Between 1095 and 1291, the European Christians launched several offensives into the Middle East, massacring anyone who stood in their way. They fought against Muslims, Jews, other Christians, anyone. As long as you weren't Catholic, you were a heretic and had no right to live. In total, it is estimated that around 17 million people died during the Crusades. So who exactly were the Crusaders fighting for? Well, to answer that question, we need to go back to the beginning. In 1095, Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, an event that would kick off this holy war frenzy. On November of that year, while addressing a crowd gathered for All Saints' Day in the Church of St. Peter's Square, he announced that God had laid the economico on his soul to aid the Eastern Orthodox Church, which at the time was under attack by the expanding Turkish armies. According to legend, while saying this, he pointed towards the east, and when the crowd looked in that direction, they saw the words Deus vult, which translates to God wills it. This supposed divine command energized the European. Christians and soon tens of thousands of men and women had assembled at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem to begin their pilgrimage east. However, while on their way there, many turned violent, attacking Jewish communities along the route. And by the time they arrived in Jerusalem, they had developed a taste for blood. When the city fell, the Crusaders went on a rampage, slaughtering Muslims, Jews, and even fellow Christians who are not part of the crusade. In total, around 2 million people are thought to have died in the sack of Jerusalem. But still, in the years that followed, the Crusaders would go on to lose most of the territory they had gained. And despite the hundreds of thousands of casualties, the First Crusade is considered a success because it established 4 Crusader states in the Levant, albeit small ones. But it wasn't long before the Catholics wanted more. And in 1147, Pope Eugene III called for the Second Crusade. Once again, he cited the plight of the Eastern Orthodox as a reason for going to war, but also added that God had shown him visions of Jerusalem, which included a great massacre. Perhaps in hindsight, that should have been a clue that God wasn't too keen on another crusade. Despite this, around 30,000 European soldiers set off for the Holy Land. But after suffering heavy losses due to starvation and disease, only about 18,000 made it to the front lines. Even with these low numbers, though, they managed to defeat the Muslim forces in several battles, gaining them more territory in the process. Still, 2 years later, the Muslims counterattacked, pushing the Crusaders all the way back to Jerusalem. But while the Second Crusade failed to achieve its military objectives, it did help to strengthen the Church's power in Europe. With each crusade, the Pope grew in wealth and influence, as did the European nobles who led the charge. It was during the Second Crusade that Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany emerged as the most powerful figures in Christendom. And with the support of the Church, they built vast feudal states that would dominate Western Europe for the next 2 centuries. By the time the Third Crusade rolled around in 1189, the momentum had clearly shifted. No longer was this a religious movement aimed at winning back Jerusalem. Instead, it had become a territorial war between Christian and Muslim rulers. In fact, the Third Crusade was sparked by the death of a French king. When Louis VII died in 1180, his brother Philip II of France seized his territories, including the county of Tripoli in the Levant. Upon hearing this, Saladin, the Muslim ruler of Egypt and Syria, launched an invasion into the region, forcing the European Christians to send for backup. Soon enough, three of the most powerful kings in Europe, Richard the Lionheart of England, Philip II of France, and Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, had assembled an army of 20,000 knights and headed to the Holy Land. Their goal: destroy Saladin and win back the lost territory. Though after several months of fighting, they were forced to make peace with the Muslims and return home. Though what came next would make the previous Crusades look like Sunday school picnics. During the Children's Crusade of 1212, tens of thousands of children left their homes in France and Germany, claiming that God had told them to go to the Holy Land to take back Jerusalem. Many of the children died of starvation and disease, while others were sold into slavery. But those who survived were met with even worse news. When they reached the coast of what is now Israel, they found that the ships which were supposed to take them to the Holy Land had sailed away. Of the 40,000 children who set out on this ill-fated mission, only 1,000 ever returned home. So do you think they were fighting for God or for power and gold? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.